you may be investigated and prosecuted. The Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario has introduced new curriculum to require teachers to teach elementary students about white privilege. And the Federal Summer Grants Program requires applicants to attest to the values that the government believes in. They don't have to believe it.
It's a fucking lie!
But
There's no such thing as compelled speech! The government cannot tell you what to do!
That's pure narcissism at work, by the way. You know, to hijack an event like this that other people put time and effort into, and to use their civility of the crowd and the civility of the organizers as an excuse to blatantly yell out your ill-informed opinions is no way to conduct a civil dialogue. It's absolutely appalling. The people who do that should be embarrassed. I would also say that as students and as faculty members, you shouldn't put up with it. There's no way that you should allow people who are doing this to hijack your educational opportunities and to bend and twist the functions and the structures of the university. It's not a good thing, not in any way at all. I would say that was a very disgraceful display, fundamentally. So
let's stick with it. Why do you think people are afraid of free speech?
Well, you know, people develop an ideological view of the world because they don't want to think through things in real detail, and they're aided and abetted in that endeavor by their pathological professors who are feeding them, what would I say, an oversimplified radical view of the world that, in my estimation, is fundamentally based in resentment. Not that there's no reason for, say, a left-wing view of the world, and we can get to that later. It's easy virtue. You know, you can stand up in front of 900 people with your placard and your screeching, and you can declaim to the entire audience your fundamental moral superiority. You can tell everyone at once that they're all beneath you and you're standing for the right thing, and absolutely none of that is earned. You know, like what the hell was that? No, seriously, man. It's just complete misbehavior. It's embarrassing. And the fact that the people who do that don't have enough sense to go hide their head in shame just tells you how badly socialized they are and how terribly educated they are. And the thing that's so awful is that there are professors and educators who promote that. They say, well, that's how you change the world. It's like, it is how you change the world, but it's certainly not how you make it better. You make it worse, clearly. You know, there's no comfort in that, and there's nothing about it that's impressive. It's no better in some sense than a 2-year-old having a tantrum on the floor. It shows, as far as I'm concerned, it approximates the same level of psychosocial development. So, and the fact that this is happening continually at universities it truly makes me embarrassed to be associated with the university. And I say that with great displeasure because, you know, I've been working for great universities for a very long time, and the university is an absolutely remarkable institution. You know, it's survived for 1,000 years, and to see it brought down by by people whose behavior would be out of place at a 4-year-old's birthday party is something abysmal to behold.
So what about the actions of government now? Because it is government, after all, that is the source of this compelled speech, as well as other ways in which they seek to restrict speech. But the compelled speech is the most egregious form of violation of freedom of expression. So tell us about that.
Well, I've been trying to sort this out because, if you're a clinician, I would say one of the problems you always have when you're dealing with behavior that's gone astray is to understand at what level of analysis you should address it. Is it a theological problem? Is it a philosophical problem? Is it a psychological problem? Is it social? Is it economic? These are very complicated questions. Is it a trivial issue? Is it an issue of rights? Is it something else? The people who put in Bill C-16, for example, and its associated legislation, make the claim that it's a legislative movement that's facilitated by nothing but compassion and desire to expand the domain of let's say, of rights and freedoms. And there's nothing wrong in principle with expanding the domain of rights and freedoms, except, of course, for every right and for every freedom, there's an attendant responsibility and obligation, so you have to keep that in mind. When I looked at Bill C-16 and the legislation that surrounded it, especially that was written by the Ontario Human Rights Commission, the policies that surrounded it, and also the policies that gave rise to the social justice tribunals, named social justice tribunals, appallingly enough, that gave rise to those tribunals in Ontario, the things I read just made my hair stand on end. The social justice tribunals have the right to place themselves outside of outside of jurisprudential precedents. It's like, what the hell is that? It's really, you're going to make the case. The only way I think that you could justify doing that is that if you tortured yourself into the ideological proposition that English common law is somehow an oppressive branch of the patriarchy, and because of that you have every right and even obligation to place yourself outside of its structure of precedent. But we don't want to place ourselves outside of the structure of precedent of English common law, I can tell you that. It's one of the supreme achievements of the human race. It's produced societies that are as free and as productive as any societies have ever been anywhere on the planet, and certainly are now. And to dare to state that you would place yourself outside of that precedent, that's the sort of thing that made my hair stand on end. And there are other elements of the policies that were equally reprehensible, not least their complete incoherence of formulation. I couldn't understand some of it. Like, I don't understand, for example, with regards to the gender propositions, how it can be that you can be anywhere on the gender spectrum, which, by the way, is not a spectrum technically, and it actually matters which words you use if you're writing law. You can be anywhere or nowhere on that spectrum. Like, I don't know what that means, and I don't believe that the people who wrote it know what it means either. And you don't write things that you don't understand into the damn law. You don't do that because the law unfolds in society, and it tangles people up as it unfolds. And it's no joke when that happens. So you be very, very careful when you're writing law. And you certainly don't want to write law to push forward your ideological commitments, especially in the face of precedent, because precedent is what keeps law from degenerating into ideology, essentially. And so to answer your question, more fundamentally, I don't believe that this argument has ever been about the rights of transgender people. I think that it's an attempt by the radical left ideologues to push their ideological agenda forward using attempts to manipulate the linguistic domain. And I'm not willing to cede the linguistic domain because I don't think there are anything more important than the words that you use. And then when the government says, well, you should start using these words, you should start thinking hard about your damn government, because your words are no different than your thoughts.